The sky over Lakeside was painted in shades of orange as the sun sank behind the pines surrounding Westfield High. It was May of 1999 and the parking lot was filling with limousines and decorated cars. Emily Thompson took one last look at herself in the rearview mirror of her father's sedan. Her green eyes shimmered with anticipation and her sky-blue dress caught the last light of dusk. "You look beautiful, honey," Robert Thompson said, nervously adjusting his own tie. "Just remember, be back before midnight." Emily nodded, but her thoughts were already in the gymnasium, a world of silver balloons and twinkling lights. Tonight marked the end of her high school life and the beginning of something new. The University of California was waiting for her in the fall, far from this small town where everyone knew her secrets. "Emily!" The voice of Melissa Cooper echoed across the parking lot. Her best friend was waiting at the entrance, her red dress a stark contrast to her pale skin. "You finally made it! Jason's inside. He's already asked about you 3 times." The gymnasium was a whirlwind of music, laughter, and chatter. The local band played covers of the Backstreet Boys and Britney Spears while teachers stood guard in the corners, ensuring no one smuggled in any alcohol. "Saved you some punch," Jason Matthews said, approaching with 2 red plastic cups. His black tuxedo made him look older, almost an adult. Emily took the cup, smiling. They had been dating for 6 months, and though she knew it would end when she left for California, tonight she wanted to pretend they had a future together. At 10 o'clock, Principal Sanders took the stage to announce the prom king and queen. Emily clapped when Heather Williams and Mike Peterson were named. She didn't care about those plastic crowns. She had bigger plans than high school popularity. "I'm going to the bathroom," she whispered to Melissa after the announcement. "Save me a spot for the last dance." The hallway was surprisingly quiet compared to the roar of the gym. Emily walked past empty lockers and darkened classrooms, an unexpected shiver running down her spine. The high school had an unsettling quality at night, as if the corridors themselves held secrets. As she was leaving the restroom, she noticed a figure at the end of the hall. It was Dr. Maxwell Harris, the father of her classmate, Catherine. What was he doing here? As the town's respected physician, he sometimes attended school events, but he seemed out of place at a prom. Emily Thompson?" His voice was smooth, professional. "Catherine asked me to find you. She's not feeling well and is in my car. She's asking for you." Emily hesitated. Catherine wasn't exactly a friend, but they had been lab partners in biology. "She's really not well. I told her I should let her friends know. It will only take a moment," Dr. Harris insisted, smiling kindly. "My car is just outside." He explained Catherine had a mild allergic reaction, nothing serious. Something in his gaze made Emily uneasy, but she didn't want to seem paranoid. This was Dr. Harris, after all, the man who had delivered half the students at Westfield. The parking lot was darker now. The music from the gym sounded distant, an echo from another reality. Emily followed the doctor to a black sedan parked away from the main lights. "I don't see Catherine," she said, stopping a few feet from the vehicle. Dr. Harris opened the back door. "She's lying down. Come and see." In that instant, Emily knew something was terribly wrong. She took a step back, ready to run, but felt a sharp prick in her arm. Looking down, she saw a syringe in the doctor's gloved hand. "What?" Her voice sounded distant in her own ears. The parking lot began to spin, the lights stretching like shooting stars. The last thing Emily Thompson saw was Dr. Harris's face, no longer kind but clinically curious, as darkness enveloped her completely. Inside the gym, Melissa glanced at her watch. The last song was about to begin and Emily hadn't returned. Jason walked over, a frown on his face. "Where's Em? I've been looking for her for half an hour." A cold premonition settled in Melissa's stomach. "I don't know," she said. "She said she was going to the bathroom, but she never came back." As Green Day's Time of Your Life, filled the gymnasium. No one noticed that Emily Thompson, with her California dreams and her sky-blue dress, had vanished into the May night, leaving behind only a half-empty cup of punch and a vacant seat beside her friends. The case of Emily Thompson hit Lakeside like an unexpected earthquake. For weeks, posters bearing her smiling face appeared on every lamppost and storefront. Westfield students held candlelight vigils and parents began enforcing strict curfews. The small town, which once prided itself on never locking its doors, now lived in a state of constant anxiety. Sheriff Bill Donovan led the initial investigation with the county police department. They interviewed every student who attended the prom, reviewed security footage from the parking lot, which unfortunately didn't cover the area where Emily was last seen, and scoured the surrounding woods. "It makes no sense," Jason Matthews repeated during interrogations. "We were dancing, she went to the bathroom, and she never came back. How does someone just vanish?" Melissa Cooper was the last confirmed person to see Emily. She was perfectly normal, excited about college. She wasn't sad or acting strange. Someone took her, I'm sure of it. Investigators considered every possibility, from a voluntary runaway to a kidnapping, to something more sinister. But with no body, no witnesses, and no concrete leads, Emily Thompson's case gradually grew cold, relegated to the archives as new crimes demanded attention. Robert and Diana Thompson refused to give up. They hired private investigators, appeared on national television programs, and established a substantial reward. Diana quit her job as a teacher to dedicate herself completely to the search for her only child. Their marriage, already strained before the disappearance, began to crumble under the weight of grief and uncertainty. Time passed. Lakeside tried to heal. Emily's posters faded in the sun and rain. The class of 1999 scattered to colleges and jobs. Only her parents and closest friends kept her memory alive. In the fall of 2003, 4 years after the disappearance, the county police department underwent a reorganization. The new chief assigned cold cases to specialized teams, and Emily Thompson's file landed on the desk of detectives Jake Morrison and Sarah Chen. Morrison, a 48-year-old veteran with sun-weathered skin and a caffeine addiction, had solved some of the county's toughest cases. Chen, 15 years his junior, brought a fresh perspective and a master's degree in forensic psychology that complemented her partner's street-honed intuition. "Why this case?" Chen asked, reviewing the file in their shared, gray-walled office. "It's been 4 years. The statistical odds." "Look at her picture," Morrison interrupted, pointing to Emily's school photo. "That smile. It reminds me of my daughter. Besides, a body was never found. Where there's no body, there's always hope." They began by reviewing the original interviews, searching for inconsistencies or overlooked details. They visited Westfield High, walking the route Emily would have taken from the gym to the bathroom. They spoke with Jason Matthews, now a law student in Chicago, and with Melissa Cooper, who worked at the local library. "I never got over it," Melissa confessed, pouring coffee in her small, cozy apartment. "Sometimes I dream that Emily will walk through that door laughing at us for thinking she was gone." A week after reopening the case, the office received an anonymous call. "You should check the Riverside Clinic," a distorted male voice said. "In the basement. Look behind the false wall in the records room. You'll find answers about the Thompson girl there." The Riverside Clinic was a small, private psychiatric facility on the outskirts of Lakeside. Founded in the 70s, it catered primarily to wealthy patients with addiction issues or mild mental disorders. Its reputation was impeccable, and its medical director, Dr. Maxwell Harris, was a respected figure in the regional medical community. "You got a warrant?" Chen asked as they drove to the clinic in their unmarked sedan. Morrison nodded, patting his pocket. Judge Peterson signed it this morning, but let's keep a low profile. If there's something shady in there, we don't want them hiding it before we can see it. The Riverside Clinic stood among leafy trees, a red brick building with small windows and an air of elegant discretion. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman in a pearl necklace, raised an eyebrow at their badges. "Dr. Harris is at a conference in Boston," she informed them. "He returns tomorrow. May I ask what this is about?" "Routine," Morrison replied vaguely. "Could you show us to the records room? We need to verify some files." The records room was in the basement, just as the tipster had said. The receptionist left them there, clearly uncomfortable but not daring to question a court order. "Look for anything unusual," Morrison whispered as they scanned the walls of metal filing cabinets. "A draft of air, a panel that sounds hollow." Chen was methodically tapping the back wall when she noticed something. "Look at the floor. There are scuff marks that end at this section." Upon closer inspection, they found a hidden mechanism in one of the cabinets. When activated, a section of the wall slid open silently, revealing a narrow corridor lit by humming fluorescent lights. "My God," Chen murmured, drawing her weapon. "Call for backup." The corridor led to a series of small rooms, each with a metal door and a tiny observation window. Most were empty, but in the last one, curled on a narrow bed, they saw a young woman with matted brown hair and a vacant stare. Morrison felt his heart lurch as the woman looked up. Despite the sickly pallor and the years that had passed, he recognized those green eyes from the photograph he'd been studying for days. "Emily Thompson?" he asked gently as Chen called for an ambulance. The woman blinked slowly, as if waking from a long and terrible dream. Who are you?" Her voice was hoarse from disuse. "County Police," Morrison replied, approaching cautiously. "We've been looking for you for 4 years, Emily." A single tear rolled down the young woman's pale cheek. 4 years, she repeated in a whisper. "He said no one would ever find me." The County General Hospital became the epicenter of an unprecedented media storm. In less than 24 hours, the news of Emily Thompson's discovery spread from local outlets to national networks. Journalists from across the country camped out in the parking lot as police officers guarded every entrance. Inside, in a private room on the 3rd floor, Emily remained isolated from the chaos. Doctors diagnosed her with malnutrition, anemia, and profound psychological dissociation. Her body showed signs of prolonged sedation and confinement, atrophied muscles, a severe vitamin D deficiency, and scars on her wrists and ankles where restraints had cut into her skin. "Physically, she will recover," Dr. Lydia Fernandez explained to Morrison and Chen in the hallway. "But the psychological trauma, that will take years if she ever fully heals." Robert and Diana Thompson, now divorced but reunited by the miraculous news, waited in an adjacent room. Diana had aged a decade in 4 years, her hair now completely gray, her face etched with deep lines. Robert looked equally devastated, his shoulders slumped under the combined weight of guilt and relief. "When can we see her?" Diana asked, her voice trembling. "Soon," Chen replied gently. "The doctors are stabilizing her. In the meantime, we need to understand what happened. Every detail is crucial to building our case against Harris." Dr. Maxwell Harris had been apprehended at Boston Logan Airport while attempting to board a flight to Zurich. In his luggage, authorities found fake passports and over $250,000 in cash. His daughter, Catherine, who had indeed been at the prom in 1999, denied any knowledge of her father's activities and was cooperating fully with the investigation. At the station, forensic teams were analyzing records seized from the Riverside Clinic. They uncovered evidence of at least 7 other patients who had been held in the secret wing. though Emily was the only one present when the detectives arrived. The other names and their whereabouts remained a mystery. It started with an audio recording, Emily explained 3 days later during her first formal interview. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, forcing Morrison and Chen to lean in. A hospital psychologist sat by her side, holding her hand when the memories became too intense. I woke up in a white room. I couldn't move. Dr. Harris, was there, recording my responses as he showed me images. He said he was studying the neuropsychology of fear in adolescence. Every day, new images, new questions. If I resisted, he would sedate me. Emily paused, her gaze fixed on an invisible point on the wall. Over time, the questions changed. They weren't about the images anymore. They were about me. My fears, my desires, my dreams. He seemed obsessed with what I dreamed about under sedation. Morrison exchanged a look with Chen. They had both investigated cases of abuse, but this suggested something more systematic, almost scientific in its perversion. Was there any other kind of abuse? Chen asked delicately. Emily shook her head. Not in the way you mean. He never touched me like that. It was as if I were just a specimen to him, a brain in a jar that he could study without the interference of my humanity. Did you ever see any other patients? Morrison inquired. I heard them, Emily answered, a shiver tracing a path down her emaciated frame. Sometimes they would scream, sometimes they would sing, as if they'd lost all touch with reality. There was a woman who recited poetry for hours on end and a man who counted obsessively always to 247, never more, never less. The interviews continued for days, piecing together the puzzle of her captivity. Emily recalled moments of lucidity that alternated with long, drug-induced stretches of confusion. The pattern suggested Harris would reduce the sedatives when conducting his experiments, then increase the dosage when he needed to be away from the clinic. Meanwhile, the forensics team unearthed something disturbing. Recordings dating back to 1985, 14 years before Emily's abduction. The earliest tapes showed Harris using similar methods on the clinic's regular patients, exploiting his position to experiment on those already institutionalized. Over time, his methods grew bolder, culminating in the direct kidnapping of ideal subjects. A week after the rescue, as Emily began intensive therapy, the investigation took an unexpected turn. A retired nurse from the Riverside Clinic, Martha Wilkins, walked voluntarily into the police station. I was the one who called, she confessed to Morrison and Chen in a silent interrogation room. Her face, etched with deep wrinkles, carried the weight of secrets kept for far too long. I should have done it sooner, much sooner. Martha had worked at the clinic since it opened. At first, she had admired Dr. Harris for his apparent dedication to patients other doctors had given up on. But over the years, she noticed unsettling patterns. Patients who would disappear after showing improvement, altered records, areas of the building declared off-limits without explanation. I started to suspect in the 90s when he installed the electronic locks on the basement, she explained, twisting a handkerchief between her gnarled fingers. One day I followed him. I saw him go into that secret room, and I listened to the voices. Why did you wait so long to report it? Morrison asked, not bothering to hide his frustration. Martha lowered her gaze. Fear, she whispered. Harris had powerful connections. Once a young nurse questioned his methods. She was fired immediately, then arrested for stealing medication. We all knew it was a lie, but no one dared to defend her. Martha's confession provided the investigation with its crucial link. A list of names. 7 people besides Emily whom Harris had held captive at various times. 3 had died during their imprisonment. 2 had been transferred to regular psychiatric facilities when his experiments failed, conveniently diagnosed as schizophrenic, and 2 more had vanished completely. Melissa, Emily whispered when Chen showed her the list during their next interview. Her trembling finger pointed to the last name. Melissa Cooper, my best friend. He had her. Chen frowned, confused. But we spoke with Melissa 2 weeks ago. She works at the local library. Emily shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. That's not her. It can't be. Melissa was in the room next to mine for almost a year. I heard her cry every night. Morrison and Chen drove immediately back to the Lakeside library. The woman calling herself Melissa Cooper was arranging children's books for the weekly story hour. When she saw the detectives, her face transformed. In an instant, the kindly librarian vanished, replaced by a calculating expression they had never seen in previous interviews. Catherine Harris, Morrison said, watching as the woman assessed her options. Or should I say, Dr. Harris's accomplice? There was no chase. The false Melissa simply dropped the book she was holding and held out her wrists for the cuffs. He was getting sloppy, she commented with a chilling calm as they escorted her from the building. It was only a matter of time before it all came crashing down. The real Melissa Cooper was found that night buried in a shallow grave behind the Harris family's country home. She had been murdered shortly after Emily's disappearance, her identity stolen as part of an elaborate plan to monitor the investigation from the inside. Catherine Harris, trained by her father in manipulation and deceit, had seamlessly taken over her life. The press dubbed the case the Clinic of Horrors. For weeks, Lakeside became the epicenter of an unprecedented media hurricane. Satellite trucks clogged the main streets and reporters ambushed any resident who might offer the slightest comment on Maxwell Harris or his daughter. Amid the frenzy, Emily Thompson remained protected in the hospital, shielded from the cameras and microphones hungry for macabre details. Her physical recovery was progressing, but her doctors were cautious about her psychological state. Imagine spending 4 years without seeing the sun, her physician, Dr. Fernandez, explained to Emily's parents. Her mind created survival mechanisms that now have to be gradually readapted to freedom. Meanwhile, the investigation spread like wildfire. The district attorney, Leonard Hayes, established a task force dedicated solely to the Harris case. Morrison and Chen led the police efforts, working 18-hour days to unravel the complex web of crimes. The interrogation of Catherine Harris proved particularly disturbing. Unlike her father, who had retreated behind a wall of silence and expensive lawyers, Catherine spoke with a clinical frankness that chilled the blood. It started when I was 12, she recounted in the interrogation room, her voice a flat monotone. My father explained that we were different, that we saw the world as it truly was, a laboratory for human behavior. He taught me to observe, to document, to manipulate. It was our family project. And Melissa Cooper? Chen asked, maintaining her professional composure despite the horror she felt. An opportunity, Catherine replied with a shrug. Emily was gone and the town needed someone to keep her memory alive, someone who could monitor the investigation from the inside. Melissa was perfect. No close family, physically similar to me, and Emily's best friend. No one would question her grief or her obsession with the case. How did you manage the transition? Morrison pressed. People should have noticed the differences. Catherine smiled, a gesture that never reached her eyes. People see what they expect to see, detective. I studied Melissa for months before I replaced her. Her speech patterns, her mannerisms, even the way she held her coffee cup. The rest was simple. A move to a new part of town, a new haircut, stories about how the tragedy had changed me. The narrative wrote itself. Medical records and personal journals seized from the Harris residence revealed the full scope of the experiments. For 3 decades, Maxwell Harris had studied what he termed the plasticity of identity under extreme stress. His early research, published legitimately in academic journals, had explored how patients with dissociative disorders developed coping mechanisms. Over time, his methods grew more invasive, and his ethics vanished completely. Emily represented the culmination of his life's work. She was young, psychologically resilient, and had planned to study neuroscience. Harris had selected her meticulously, monitoring her school grades and psychological profile for years before the abduction. 3 weeks after her rescue, Emily requested a meeting with the detectives without her parents or therapists present. Her appearance had improved considerably. She had gained weight. Her hair shone again, and some of the life had returned to her eyes. Yet a persistent shadow still lurked behind her gaze. "I remembered something," she announced as Morrison and Chen sat by her hospital bed. "Something about the other doctors." Emily explained that during her lucid periods she would hear Harris speaking with his assistants, young physicians who rotated through the clinic, unaware of the true nature of the research in the basement. One of them, a resident named Thomas Whitaker, had shown a particular interest in what Harris called the Metamorphosis Project. He was grooming him, Emily explained, her voice firmer than in their previous conversations. He said Whitaker had the right perspective to carry on his legacy. The revelation triggered a new line of investigation. Thomas Whitaker, now the director of a small psychiatric clinic in Oregon, was placed under immediate surveillance. The FBI joined the case, concerned about the possibility of a wider network of doctors performing similar experiments. The first preliminary hearing for Maxwell and Catherine Harris drew national attention. The county courthouse, a modest red brick building, was surrounded by protesters demanding justice. Inside, Emily faced her captors for the first time since her rescue. "I recognize the accused," she declared, her voice cracking slightly as she pointed first to Maxwell, then to Catherine. "He kidnapped me and experimented on me for 4 years. She assisted him, documenting the results and administering the drugs." During cross-examination, Harris's defense attorney tried to suggest that Emily had been a voluntary patient, her reality distorted by post-traumatic stress. The strategy collapsed when the prosecution presented audio recordings found in Harris's private study. "Subject E continues to resist identity recalibration," the doctor's voice echoed through the courtroom. "Unlike Subject M, who achieved mission completion on day 43, this one maintains a core of resistance even after 400 days of conditioning." Fascinating. The evidence was overwhelming. The grand jury handed down formal indictments for kidnapping, illegal human experimentation, murder, falsifying medical records, and dozens of additional charges. If convicted, both Maxwell and Catherine faced life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the case moved toward trial, Emily began the painful transition to a new normal. At 21, she had lost the formative years her peers had spent studying, socializing, and growing. The university that had once awaited her had held her spot, offering a full scholarship for whenever she felt ready. "I don't know if I'll ever be ready," she confessed to Sarah Chen during one of their regular visits. The two women had developed a special bond, with Chen becoming a sort of older sister to Emily. "Sometimes I wake up convinced I'm still in that room, that all of this is just an elaborate hallucination induced by his drugs." "That's normal," Chen answered softly. "Trauma changes how we experience reality. But every day you live out here, every choice you make for yourself, weakens his hold on you." A month before the trial was scheduled to begin, the unexpected happened. Maxwell Harris was found unconscious in his cell, the victim of an apparent heart attack. He died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, taking many of his secrets to the grave. The news provoked a surprising reaction in Emily. Laughter, an uncontrollable laugh that soon dissolved into devastating sobs. "It's not fair," she cried as her therapist tried to calm her. He escaped. He's still in control. He decided how this would end. Catherine Harris, for her part, radically changed her legal strategy following her father's death. She accepted a plea bargain with the prosecution, confessing to the full details of the crimes in exchange for avoiding the death penalty. Her testimony led to the arrest of Thomas Whitaker and two other doctors who had participated in the experiments. 6 months after her rescue, Emily Thompson gave her first and only public interview on a national television program. Her goal was not fame, but to raise awareness about the need for ethical oversight in private psychiatric facilities. "What happened to me could be happening to someone else right now," she explained, her voice clear and steady. "We need more transparency, more protections for the vulnerable." And when the interviewer asked how she envisioned her future, Emily smiled gently. "Day by day," she answered. "I lost 4 years, but I won't let him control the ones I have left. Every dawn I see is a victory. Every choice I make for myself is an act of defiance." In Lakeside, the Riverside Clinic was demolished. The land was donated for a community park. Where secret rooms and silent suffering once stood, children now played under the sun, their parents watching over them, more vigilant than they had been before Emily Thompson vanished one May night so long ago. The spring of 2005 arrived in Lakeside with an explosion of color and new life. Cherry blossoms bloomed along the main avenue, and the park, built on the ruins of the Riverside Clinic, filled with families on the weekends. To any visitor, the town seemed to have returned to its bucolic normalcy, but beneath the surface, the scars remained. Emily Thompson had returned to college 3 months earlier, ultimately choosing the state university over her original plans in California. The proximity to home provided a sense of security she wasn't willing to sacrifice. She had enrolled in psychology, not neuroscience, as she had once planned. "I want to understand so I can help," she would explain when asked about the change. Her return to academia did not go unnoticed. Though the administration tried to protect her privacy, the students knew who she was. Some avoided her, uncomfortable with the sheer scale of her tragedy. Others treated her with an excessive delicacy that she found just as alienating. Only a few saw her simply as Emily, the freshman who enjoyed cinnamon in her coffee and struggled with statistics. Among them was Daniel Ramirez, a senior social work major she had met in a support group for trauma survivors. Unlike everyone else, Daniel never asked about her captivity, but he also never shied away from the topic when Emily needed to talk. "We are all more than the worst things that have happened to us," he told her during one of their walks across campus, as the last rays of the spring sun bathed the brick buildings in a warm glow. "But our scars don't have to be invisible either. They're maps of where we've been." Their relationship grew slowly, built on a foundation of deep conversations and comfortable silences. It wasn't romance Emily was looking for. The idea of physical intimacy still triggered panic attacks. But in Daniel, she found something just as valuable: understanding without judgment. Meanwhile, Detective Sarah Chen remained in regular contact. They had established a tradition of having lunch together on Sundays, sharing updates about their lives and occasionally the case. Chen had been promoted to lieutenant after cracking the Harris investigation and now supervised the department's Special Victims Unit. "Catherine's trial starts next month," Chen mentioned during one of their lunches, carefully watching Emily's reaction. "The prosecutor wants you to testify again." Emily nodded, absently pushing the lettuce around in her salad. "I'll do it," she said, "but this time, I want to look her straight in the eye when I speak." The trial of Catherine Harris drew less media attention than the preliminary hearings, but the courtroom was still packed every day. The defense had abandoned any pretense of innocence. Their strategy now was to portray Catherine as just another victim. manipulated since childhood by a psychopathic father conditioned to obey and participate. When Emily took the stand, an absolute silence fell over the room. She wore a navy blue suit, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. At first glance, she could have been any young professional, but those who knew her could see the signs, the rigidity in her shoulders, the way her eyes constantly scanned the exits, the slight tremor in her hands that she controlled by lacing her fingers together. "Miss Thompson," Prosecutor Hayes began, "could you describe for the jury your interactions with the defendant during your captivity?" Emily took a deep breath, her gaze locking directly onto Catherine, who watched her with an unreadable expression from the defense table. Catherine Harris was not a passive participant, she declared, her voice firm. She administered my sedatives, she documented my reactions, and on occasion she conducted her own experiments when her father was away. She spoke to me constantly about how my mind would eventually break and how they would rebuild it to their specifications. During the cross-examination, the defense attorney tried to establish that Catherine had acted under duress. Emily dismissed the notion flatly. She enjoyed her work, she stated. I remember it clearly. Once, when I showed improvement on a cognitive test, she was visibly disappointed. She told me, "That's a shame. I was hoping this batch of compounds would produce significant decay." Those are not the words of someone being forced to participate. After 3 weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated for just 4 hours before returning their verdict: guilty on all counts. Catherine Harris was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, to be served at a maximum security facility with a specialized psychiatric unit. Leaving the courthouse after the sentencing, Emily paused on the steps, breathing in the cool afternoon air. For the first time in years, she felt a chapter was truly closing. "Are you okay?" asked her mother, who had attended every single day of the trial. "No," Emily answered honestly, "but I will be." That night, in her small apartment near campus, Emily experienced something extraordinary. 7 hours of uninterrupted sleep. No nightmares, no waking with a jolt, believing she was still a captive. When she rose, she recorded this milestone in the journal her therapist had recommended she keep. Life moved forward. Emily completed her first semester with strong grades. Daniel graduated, accepting a position at a crisis center in the city but remaining a close friend. Diana Thompson began dating a retired literature professor, rediscovering parts of herself she had forgotten during the dark years of her daughter's disappearance. Not all developments were positive, however. Dr. Thomas Whitaker, the physician implicated by Catherine's testimony, was found dead in his cell while awaiting trial, an apparent suicide. The investigation into the wider network of doctors involved in illegal experiments hit constant roadblocks. Records were destroyed, witnesses vanished, and political interference from unknown sources stymied their every move. "Something bigger is at play here," Morrison confessed to Chen during a late night at the office. Both detectives had continued to investigate additional connections in their own time, convinced the Harris case was only the tip of the iceberg. These aren't just a few rogue doctors with questionable ethics. There are patterns, funding, institutional protection. Chen nodded, studying the map on the wall where they had pinned similar medical facilities across the country. "Do you think we should tell Emily? Does she have a right to know?" "Not yet," Morrison replied after a long pause. "She's rebuilding her life. Let's let her have some peace before she has to face the possibility that this is so much bigger than Harris." What the detectives didn't know was that Emily had already begun to suspect. Her university coursework had led her to research historical cases of unethical psychiatric experimentation, from the infamous Tuskegee experiments to Project MK Ultra. She noted unsettling similarities to Harris's methods, patterns that suggested not innovation, but a refinement of pre-existing techniques. During the summer break, Emily began compiling her own database, cross-referencing unsolved disappearances within a 200-mile radius of Lakeside, focusing on young people with psychological profiles similar to her own. She soon identified 3 cases that fit the pattern: exceptional students who vanished without explanation, investigations that quickly went cold, and the presence of private medical facilities near the locations of their disappearance. One night, while sifting through old articles in the university library, Emily found something that made her pulse quicken. It was a photograph from 1987 showing Dr. Maxwell Harris receiving a research award. Standing beside him, barely visible in the background, was a man Emily recognized immediately despite his youth. Dr. Richard Blackwood, the current director of the Westlake Neuropsychiatric Institute, a prestigious facility just 50 miles from Lakeside. With trembling hands, Emily took a picture of the article with her phone and sent the image to Sarah Chen with a short message. "We need to talk. I don't think it's over." Chen's reply came almost instantly. "My office, 8 a.m. tomorrow. Don't talk to anyone else about this." As Emily packed up her materials, she didn't notice the middle-aged man watching her from behind a nearby bookshelf. Nor did she see him discreetly raise his phone to make a report. "She's connecting the dots. Proceed with the contingency plan." Sarah Chen's office was on the 3rd floor of the county police department, a modernized building that stood in stark contrast to the colonial architecture of most of Lakeside. Emily arrived 15 minutes early, her backpack stuffed with printouts and an external hard drive with her backups. She had slept barely 3 hours, her mind racing with the discovery and its implications. "You're early," Chen observed, opening the door for her. The lieutenant looked equally tired, with dark circles under her eyes and a coffee mug that was likely not her first of the morning. "I couldn't wait," Emily replied, immediately spreading her documents across Chen's desk. "Look at this." For the next hour, Emily methodically laid out her theory. Dr. Blackwood not only knew Harris, but he had likely been his mentor. The two had published academic papers with strikingly similar terminology, albeit decades apart. The facility Blackwood now ran had restricted sections similar to the Riverside Clinic, and at least 2 patients had vanished from their records in the last 5 years. "You can't rule out coincidence," Chen cautioned, though her expression showed she found Emily's argument compelling. Harris could have copied Blackwood's methods without his knowledge or approval. And this? Emily slid a sheet of paper across the desk, a list of names. 7 people who disappeared under circumstances similar to mine. 3 of them had documented appointments at Blackwood's Institute before they vanished. Chen studied the list, her face hardening. "Does Morrison know about this?" "I wanted to show you first," Emily explained. "I trust you." Something in Emily's tone made Chen look at her more closely. "Is there something else you're not telling me?" Emily hesitated, biting her lower lip. "Yesterday, after I found the photograph, I felt like I was being followed. A man in the library, then in the parking lot. It's probably just paranoia, but—" Chen didn't let her finish. She picked up her phone and dialed quickly. "Jake, get to my office now and bring the Blackwood file." Morrison appeared 5 minutes later, a worn folder under his arm and a look of concern when he saw Emily. "I didn't think we were bringing her into this," he said, directing a questioning glance at Chen. "She brought herself in," Chen replied, gesturing to the scattered documents. "And she's found connections we missed." For the next 2 hours, the 3 of them compared notes, syncing information they had gathered separately. Morrison revealed that the department had been discreetly monitoring Blackwood for months, but lacked sufficient evidence to obtain warrants. The problem is Blackwood is untouchable, Morrison explained, rubbing his tired eyes. He has political connections, massive corporate funding, and a spotless public reputation. He's not like Harris, who operated in the shadows. Blackwood is in plain sight, protected by his prestige. We need a witness, Chen concluded. Someone on the inside who can confirm what we suspect. Emily was silent for a long moment, her mind processing the implications. Finally, she spoke with a calmness that surprised even herself. I could go in. The detective stared at her in disbelief. Absolutely not, Morrison said immediately. It's too dangerous and frankly too traumatic given what you've been through. It's because of what I've been through, Emily insisted. I know the signs. I know what to look for. Besides, I'm exactly the type of patient they're interested in. Young, intelligent, with a history of severe psychological trauma. I could seek treatment as an outpatient. Chen shook her head firmly. Emily, I appreciate your courage, but I cannot let you put yourself at risk. We'll find another way. The argument continued heatedly until they were interrupted by a call on Chen's desk phone. As the lieutenant listened, her expression shifted from irritation to alarm. Are you sure? Maintain surveillance. We're on our way. Hanging up, Chen looked gravely at Morrison and Emily. Emily's apartment was broken into about an hour ago. A neighbor saw two men leaving with boxes of documents and electronic equipment. The color drained from Emily's face. My research. I had copies on my computer in my notebook. You're staying with us for now, Morrison decided, leaving no room for argument. Obviously, someone knows what you found. Events accelerated dizzyingly. At Emily's apartment, the forensics team found partial prints and signs of a professional entry that left almost no trace. Her computer was gone, along with all her research notebooks. The only things left untouched were the clothes in her closet, arranged with a disturbing precision that suggested a message. We are watching you. That night, Emily was housed in a departmental safe house, a small cabin on the outskirts of Lakeside, normally reserved for protected witnesses. Chen stayed with her while Morrison coordinated the investigation into the break-in. This changes things, Chen remarked as she brewed coffee in the rustic kitchen. Whoever this is, they know you're investigating and they see you as enough of a threat to take action. Emily nodded. Hugging her knees on the worn-out sofa, the initial fear had given way to a cold resolve. Which confirms there's something to find. It also means my answer is definitively no, Chen added, referring to Emily's earlier proposal. It's far too dangerous. The discussion was put on hold when the secure phone in the cabin rang. Chen answered, listening intently before hanging up with a grim expression. The Westlake Neuropsychiatric Institute had a fire an hour ago. The administrative and record sections were completely destroyed. They're erasing the evidence, Emily whispered, a mix of frustration and validation washing over her. They know we're close. The next morning, Morrison arrived with more news. Dr. Blackwood had announced his immediate retirement for health reasons and had apparently boarded a private flight to Switzerland. Simultaneously, 3 key employees from the institute had resigned and disappeared. It's the same pattern as Harris, Morrison noted, spreading surveillance photos on the table. When they feel the heat, they run and scorch the earth behind them. What none of them expected was the news that came that afternoon. Catherine Harris had been found dead in her cell. Another apparent suicide. The circumstances were suspiciously similar to the death of Thomas Whitaker. It's not a coincidence, Emily declared, pacing the small living room. They're cutting all the connections, silencing anyone who could talk. The official investigation into the Westlake fire quickly concluded it was an electrical accident. The deaths of Catherine and Whitaker were ruled suicides without further inquiry. Despite Morrison and Chen's efforts, institutional doors were slamming shut all around them. 2 weeks later, with Emily still under protection, Lieutenant Chen received an anonymous call that would change the course of the investigation. "We're not all monsters," a distinctly distorted female voice said. "Some of us were misled and now we want to do the right thing. Search Mirror Lake, North Shore 20 feet down. You'll find a waterproof container with the files Blackwood couldn't destroy. And tell Emily Thompson she isn't crazy. The program is real and it's much bigger than she imagines." Chen discreetly mobilized a dive team, bypassing official channels that might leak information. In the cold, murky waters of Mirror Lake, just as the caller had directed, they found a hermetically sealed metal container. Inside were documents, hard drives, and recordings dating from the 1970s to the present. "Project Chameleon," Emily read from the top document as the three of them examined the material back at the cabin. "A longitudinal study on identity and memory manipulation in human subjects." The files revealed the unimaginable, a systematic program initially funded by government agencies and later privatized, dedicated to perfecting techniques of mind control and identity reconstruction. Harris and Blackwood were just two of dozens of researchers involved at different facilities across the country. "This is so much bigger than we ever imagined," Morrison muttered, his face pale as he scanned a list of subjects that spanned over 4 decades. "How in the world do we expose something of this magnitude?" Emily closed the file she was reading, a renewed determination shining in her eyes. "We start with what we have," she said. "One story at a time. My story." The motel room on the outskirts of Washington, D.C. was small but functional, with 2 queen beds and a worn desk where Emily had set up her new laptop. The curtains remained drawn, day and night, leaving just a sliver of an opening to check the parking lot. On the wall above the bed, a map of the United States was dotted with red pins connected by colored threads that traced a web of personal and financial timelines. It had been 3 months since the discovery at Mirror Lake. 3 months of relentless investigation, of traveling under false identities, and of the growing certainty that they were unearthing something many powerful people wanted to keep buried. "I've confirmed another facility," Morrison announced, walking in with coffee and sandwiches from a nearby deli. The detective had taken an indefinite administrative leave officially for burnout. Chen had done the same weeks later. Northwoods Wellness Center in Minnesota. It closed in 2001 after a tragic fire, but we have records of patient transfers to 3 different facilities, all linked to Project Chameleon. Emily nodded, adding the information to her digital diagram. Her hair, now dyed black and cut in a practical, anonymous style, framed a face that was leaner and more determined than it had been months ago. The sleepless nights and constant tension had left their marks, but they had also forged a resilience that not even her captivity had managed to break. "Any word from Sarah?" she asked, referring to Chen, who had flown to California to interview a former nurse from the program who had agreed to talk. "She landed yesterday. The meeting is today." Morrison sank into a chair, the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. "Emily, we need to talk about our next move. We've gathered enough evidence to confirm the program's existence, identify dozens of perpetrators, and document hundreds of victims." "But every day we wait," Emily finished for him, "more people suffer." "I know, but we can't just hand this over to anyone. We saw what happened in Lakeside when we tried to go through official channels." The case had become extraordinarily complicated after the initial discovery. Their attempts to present evidence to federal agencies had been systematically blocked. A district attorney who showed interest was abruptly transferred. An investigative journalist who started asking questions about Blackwood was in a coma after a car accident. The message was clear. Powerful forces were protecting Project Chameleon. This reality had forced them into a more cautious approach. Gather irrefutable evidence, identify survivors willing to testify, and build a network of trusted allies before going public. Daniel called, Emily said, changing the subject. Her friend had stayed in Lakeside, acting as their contact with the normal world and monitoring any suspicious activity. He says my mother is worried. It's getting harder for her to maintain the lie that I'm in an exchange program in Europe. Morrison nodded sympathetically. It's hard on her. Losing you once nearly destroyed her, and now, even knowing you're alive, she worries. I know, Emily sighed, but it's safer this way. For her, too. Morrison's phone vibrated with an encrypted message. It's Sarah. The meeting went well. The nurse, Michael Landers, worked at 3 different facilities between 1995 and 2008. He's willing to testify, and he has documentation that corroborates our findings. A spark of hope lit up Emily's face. How many witnesses do we have now? With Landers, 7, Morrison replied, checking his notes. 3 nurses, an administrator, 2 security guards, and a medical resident who quit when he discovered the program's true nature. It wasn't an impressive number given the program's scale, but it was a significant leap from where they had started. Each witness added another piece to the puzzle, confirming that Project Chameleon had evolved from a government mind control experiment into a privatized operation focused on perfecting techniques of psychological manipulation. And the list of survivors? Emily asked, though she already knew the answer. It was the part of the project she personally oversaw. 22 confirmed, Morrison said. 9 willing to talk, 3 with physical evidence of their captivity. Emily stood up and walked to the map. Her fingers traced the route between facilities, a path of suffering that crisscrossed the country like a sinister web. We need more. We need a case so solid that no one can ignore it or cover it up. A sharp knock on the door made them both jump. Morrison instinctively drew his weapon as Emily moved silently to their prearranged position out of the line of sight from the entrance. Who is it? Morrison called out. Room service? A female voice replied. Bisimad, you have a package at the front desk. Morrison and Emily exchanged a look. They hadn't ordered anything, and no one was supposed to know they were there. They had paid in cash and used fake IDs. Following their security protocol, Morrison peeked through the window while Emily monitored the parking lot. No suspicious vehicles were in sight. One moment, Morrison said, quickly stashing the most sensitive documents into a pre-packed emergency bag. When he finally opened the door, his hand still near his weapon, he found a young motel employee holding a manila envelope. It was left at reception this morning, she explained. No return address. Morrison tipped her and closed the door, carefully examining the envelope before opening it. Inside was a single USB drive and a handwritten note. I hear you've been asking questions. Secure communication. You have friends in high places. I hear, Emily murmured, coming closer to look at the note. Amanda Keller, Morrison said, his expression a mixture of surprise and caution. Investigative reporter for the Washington Post. I reached out to her months ago, before things got complicated. She never replied. With extreme caution, they plugged the USB into an air-gapped laptop, one specifically set up for potentially compromised material. It contained a single file, instructions for a secure video conference scheduled for that night. At 10 p.m., following the protocol, they established the connection. The screen showed an African-American woman in her 40s with thick-rimmed glasses and an expression of professional intensity. Detective Morrison, Ms. Thompson, Amanda Keller greeted them. I apologize for the theatrics, but the circumstances demand extreme caution. I've been investigating pieces of this story for nearly a decade, never managing to get enough evidence to publish. until now. Over the next hour, they exchanged information. Keller had traced the program's financial tendrils, identifying pharmaceutical corporations, defense contractors, and even seemingly philanthropic foundations that funneled money into Project Chameleon. This goes far beyond unethical medical experimentation, the journalist explained. The ultimate goal appears to be the development of behavior modification techniques applicable on a mass scale. Social control, essentially. Why contact us now? Emily asked, maintaining a healthy skepticism. Because you have what I don't. Witnesses willing to go on the record and physical evidence, and because the program is accelerating. My sources indicate a significant expansion in the last 18 months, with new facilities being established under various fronts. Rehab clinics, PTSD treatment centers, even therapeutic camps for teenagers. The revelation sent a chill down Emily's spine. The thought of vulnerable adolescents being subjected to what she had endured was unbearable. What's your proposal exactly? Morrison interjected. A coordinated publication. The Post has agreed to dedicate a full team to verify and publish the story, with complete legal protection for all witnesses. We will simultaneously deliver the evidence to 2 senators who have proven their independence from the corporate interests funding the program. The simultaneous public and political pressure will make a cover-up difficult. It was the breakthrough they had been waiting for. A legitimate platform with the resources to protect the investigation and amplify it beyond any attempt to silence them. When? Emily asked simply. We'll need 2 weeks to prepare everything, Keller replied. Some security for the witnesses, final document verification, legal protocols. On the day of publication, all testimonies, documents, and evidence will be released simultaneously on multiple platforms. Once it starts, there's no going back. After the call, Emily stood by the window for a long time, watching the distant lights of the Capitol. 4 years in captivity, nearly a year of clandestine investigation, and now, finally, the possibility of justice and exposure. What are you thinking about? Morrison asked, joining her by the window. About all the other Emilys who are still trapped, she replied softly, and about what happens when the world finally knows the truth. The Washington Post newsroom was buzzing with an unusual energy for a Sunday afternoon. In the main conference room, with its windows overlooking the Capitol's skyline, a select team of journalists, editors, and lawyers made the final preparations for what they internally called the Truth Project. Digital screens displayed countdowns and timelines, while boxes of documents were meticulously lined up on side tables. Emily watched from a corner, almost unrecognizable with her new look. Short black hair, thick-rimmed glasses, and conservative clothes that could belong to any young professional in D.C. Sarah Chen stood beside her, equally transformed in a formal suit, her expression one of quiet determination. Nervous? Chen asked in a low voice. Terrified, Emily admitted, a faint smile belying her words. But ready. The 2 weeks since their first call with Amanda Keller had been a whirlwind of activity. The witnesses had been discreetly gathered and housed in safe locations under private security. The evidence had been verified, duplicated, and distributed to multiple custodians. Morrison was coordinating from a separate location, overseeing the security of the survivors who had agreed to share their stories publicly. Amanda Keller entered the room, her usual professional composure slightly frayed by the magnitude of the moment. All teams are in position, she announced. Senators Warren and Holcomb have received the complete dossiers and are prepared to call for immediate hearings. The digital publication is scheduled for 6 a.m. tomorrow, synchronized with the special print edition. A murmur of anticipation rippled through the room. This was no ordinary article. It was a 5-part investigative series that would dominate the front page for a full week. Project Chameleon, America's secret human experimentation program. would meticulously detail decades of abuse, identifying perpetrators, financiers, and, crucially, the systems that had allowed it to exist. "And security?" asked the executive editor, a veteran of government corruption investigations. "All primary witnesses have 24-hour protection," Keller replied. "The servers are backed up in 5 different countries. If they try to shut us down technologically, the information will drop simultaneously on dozens of additional platforms." Emily's phone vibrated with a message from Morrison. Channel 7 confirms synchronized publication. "Survivors are secure, stay calm." Calm, however, was hard to come by. After so long operating in the shadows, the imminent step into the light felt like a mix of profound vulnerability and fierce resolution. Emily knew that once the story was published, her identity would be permanently linked to Project Chameleon. She would never again be just Emily Thompson. She would be the survivor, the whistleblower, a public symbol of both trauma and resistance. "I need some air," she murmured to Chen, heading toward the building's terrace. Outside, the October evening offered a cool breeze and a panoramic view of Washington. Emily took a deep breath, trying to process that after tomorrow, nothing would ever be the same. Not for her, not for the hundreds of victims, many still unidentified, and not for the architects of the program who would soon face a public reckoning. "It's a lot to take in," Chen said, joining her. "For years, all I wanted was to forget. Then all I wanted was justice. Now we're hours away from it, and I'm wondering what's left after." "Your life is left," Emily replied simply. "A life you get to choose, not one defined by what was done to you." The terrace door opened, interrupting them. Amanda Keller appeared, her expression tight with what was clearly disturbing news. "We just got a tip from an internal source," she announced without preamble. "Someone leaked our plans. They're making a move." "Who?" Chen asked, instantly alert. "Meridian Pharmaceuticals, primarily. Their lawyers just filed an emergency motion for a gag order to block the publication, citing national security and malicious defamation. They've got a friendly judge in the Eastern District." Emily felt the ground shift beneath her. Meridian was one of the primary corporate funders they had identified, using supposed research into dissociative disorders as a cover for far more sinister experiments. "Can they actually stop us legally?" she asked, fighting to keep her voice steady. "They'll try to delay, to intimidate, to divide," Keller replied. "But we're prepared. Our lawyers are filing counter-arguments as we speak. The executive editor has made a decision. We're moving the digital publication up to midnight tonight." The news electrified the newsroom when they returned. Journalists and technicians worked frantically, finalizing details and preparing the servers for the anticipated massive traffic. Phones rang constantly with new developments. Rumors from other outlets that had caught wind of the story, reports of unusual movements around facilities identified as part of Project Chameleon. At 9 p.m., another piece of disturbing news arrived. Daniel Ramirez, Emily's friend back in Lakeside, reported that unknown men had visited Diana Thompson, posing as federal agents and questioning her about her daughter's whereabouts. "My mother," Emily whispered, her face pale. "I need to warn her." "Already handled," Chen assured her. "Morrison sent a trusted contact from the local police. Your mother is safe and on her way to a secure location." As the night wore on, the tension mounted. At 11 p.m., the Post's lawyers returned with mixed news. They had successfully blocked the gag order, but Meridian had managed to obtain search warrants for the residences of several key witnesses claiming theft of intellectual property. "It's a last-ditch, desperate move," Keller assessed. "They're hunting for the original documents to claim they were tampered with." At 11:45 p.m., the tech team completed their final checks. The executive editor gathered all involved staff for a brief address. What we are about to publish will change the history of investigative journalism and expose one of the most systematic violations of human rights in our country's modern history, he declared. Be proud of the work you've done. Be ready for what comes next. Every piece of data has been verified, every testimony corroborated. We stand on the right side of history, and neither corporate pressure nor political influence will deter us. At the stroke of midnight, with a single click, the story was released to the world. Within seconds, notifications began to flood the phones of everyone present. National and international media outlets were picking up the story. Social media erupted with reactions. Interview requests poured in. Emily watched the main screen displaying the published article, its headline stark and devastating above a photograph of the Riverside Clinic. Captive Minds, the secret psychological experimentation program that abducted hundreds of Americans. Beneath it, her testimony appeared, the first of many. Her name and current photograph were presented with dignity, alongside the words she had spent weeks refining with the editors. My name is Emily Thompson. In 1999, I was abducted from my high school prom and held captive for 4 years in a clandestine psychiatric facility. I was not the first and I was not the last. This is my story, and the story of hundreds like me who were victims of Project Chameleon, a human experimentation program that has operated in the shadows for decades with corporate funding and government protection. Today, finally, the truth comes to light. In the hours that followed, the world began to react. News channels interrupted their regular programming. Political figures issued hurried statements, some demanding investigations, others attempting to distance themselves. The stock of Meridian Pharmaceuticals and other implicated companies plummeted on the Asian markets, which were already open for trading. At 6 a.m., exactly as planned, Emily, Chen, and Morrison gathered in a heavily guarded television studio for an exclusive interview with a respected news anchor. It was the moment they had envisioned for months, the opportunity to present the truth directly to the public, without filters or distortion. As the cameras were being set up, a strange calm washed over Emily, replacing the anxiety that had been her constant companion for so long. She looked at Morrison and Chen, the unlikely allies who had become family on this odyssey, and then toward the studio lights that would soon illuminate her face for millions of viewers. 5 minutes, Ms. Thompson, a production assistant announced. Emily nodded, squaring her shoulders. Her journey from victim to survivor, and finally to whistleblower, had been long and arduous. But as she prepared to share her story with the world, she knew with absolute certainty that this was not the end of her story, but the beginning of something new, not just justice for the past, but protection for the future. I'm ready, she said simply. And it was the truth.